Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror and detail, the realm where the shadows whisper ancient secrets and nightmares come to life. I am your guide through the darkness, and on this channel, we delve into the spine-chilling world of Wendigo horror stories that will send shivers down your spine. First story. The deer caught on my game camera is not right. I'm an avid hunter and tracker. I love to get outdoors and explore, shed hunt for antlers, or just hike around to view wildlife. I live in the Rocky Mountains in southwest Montana, so the forests are endless and the wildlife are abundant. Recently, I've purchased 5 new game cameras to scope out around my property. These cameras catch anything and are superior to other brands out. I own around 20 acres of forest land with a nice little creek running through it. I put them all the way around the property to see anything and everything. Within a week, I checked them. To my surprise, I had photos of a wide variety of wildlife on there, from porcupines to coyotes to deer and even a cougar passing through. I never would have imagined I had so much going on throughout the property. The next week was strange, as my cameras had taken hundreds of photos, but nothing was on them. As I kept browsing through the photos, something unnatural caught my eye. Far off in the distance in the last few photos, I could see what looked like a deer, but it was not just any normal deer. The frickin' thing was standing upright on its 2 hind legs. And as the photos went on, it appeared as if it walked like that across the whole view of the camera. Still blown away by what I had seen, I felt the need to investigate further, so I made a tree stand by the camera that caught that freakishly looking deer. After completion, I was all ready to go. Since the activity was between 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning, I went to the stand at dusk to get hunkered down and ready to find out what that was. The first night I stayed until dawn, seeing nothing, but I heard some crazy noises like whispering and talking off in the distance. I felt it odd because my closest neighbors are 2 miles away. It sent chills down my spine, but I remained sitting all night. Night 2, nothing again until about 2:30 a.m. Then I heard branches breaking, like something was stomping through the woods off in the distance, just out of range to be able to see with my night vision binoculars. I kept looking as the thumping noise was getting louder. Then I heard what sounded like a woman crying from the same direction as the branches were being broken. This really got me freaked out now, as the crying became louder and it sounded like she was begging for someone to help her. I couldn't sit and just listen any longer. I then shouted out, "Where are you? I'm here. Do you need assistance?" I got down off my tree stand and started running in the direction of the woman's crying, but it seemed as the closer I had gotten to her, she remained at about the same distance ahead of me. I kept taking to her, asking, "Where are you? Are you hurt?" And the same response, "Help me, please." This went on for about 15 minutes, and I thought to myself, what if this is some kind of trap? I've seen movies like this before. So I stopped and quickly turned around, started jogging back the way I came. This is where things get disturbing, as I was getting farther away from where I heard the crying and pleas for help. It was now getting closer to me as I was making my way back out of the woods. Now I'm scared shitless. I started sprinting towards the tree line to my property, as it sounded like whatever that was right on my tail, breaking branches, and it sounded big. I could hear its feet hitting the ground, thump, 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 thump. I finally hit the tree line and no longer heard the cries or begging for help. In the opening, I turned around just before reaching my house, and back at the tree line I could see 2 glowing yellow eyes, a dark silhouette of a figure of what appeared to be about 7 to 8 foot tall. Whatever it was just stood there staring right at me. Then I heard a low, menacing growl. Terrified now, I ran back into my house, got out the AR-15, locked and loaded, ready to blow that thing away, but as you would know it, it was gone. I walked back out to the tree line, and I could hear low whispers and talking again, like 2 people having a conversation. I knew better than to follow the sound of voices this time. After owning the country property for 15 plus years, I decided it was time to move closer to civilization for whatever was out there. I definitely did not want to encounter it again. I don't know what it was planning that night, but it was definitely sinister. Second story. Local Wendigo. Well, after all my years of supernatural encounters, I am finally making a Reddit account to post my stories. This is my most recent Wendigo encounter in DeWitt County, Texas. January 12th, 2019, around 8 p.m. Now I'm gonna be honest. I chose to go out on this particular night because my town was having a little ghost tour at the haunted hospital. I was lonely and wanted to at least see others having fun. It was 8 p.m. when I left the house and planned to be back within an hour. I have a routine of circling my town in the evening because I just like patrolling, and there's always things creeping about after nightfall. I made my way to the haunted hospital, and once I got there I saw flashlights inside the windows and heard laughter. That's nice, I thought. Seeing others have fun made me smile, and got rid of some of the loneliness I was feeling. This was the halfway point of my walk, and I started my second half heading home now. There were some woods on the opposite side of town now, but nothing impressive until I got to the last quarter of my walk. Now I was passing the baseball field on my left with a large wheat field on my right. This wheat field used to be a large extension of the woods, but was cleared out for growing wheat. I continued again and crossed the small bridge that went over a creek and past another section of woods. I was now headed towards an old metal building that has recently been turned into a place for making gates and fences. It was about 9 p.m. now. This building had two small white houses beside it and a stretch of dirt road wrapping around the backside of it before returning to normal asphalt road. Now at night this place seems pretty scary, but this was one of my favorite places to hang out at night and is a normal path I take my walks through. As I was coming up to the dirt road, I saw a very tall 8 to 10 foot pale figure with lanky arms almost dragging the ground. About 40 feet ahead of me briskly walk from the white houses to the woods. I stopped walking. What was that, I thought. Its size confused me so much that I had forgotten my previous encounters with a smaller version of it. After a few minutes of standing there, I convinced myself to continue walking forward. I mean, I was an adventurous person, and there's no way I was just going to turn tail and go home when I just saw something so odd and out of place. Not even 15 seconds into walking forward, this sudden heavy sense of dread overcame me like a giant weight crashing down on my shoulders. My instincts were telling me something was really, really wrong. I turned my iPhone light on and shined it at the woods. Nothing. I kept walking while keeping my head on a swivel, looking in all directions to keep my surroundings in check. About the 5th or 6th time I looked at the woods, I saw it. A huge bleached white humanoid figure crouched on all fours. It was easily still 5 to 6 feet tall even though it was bent over. Its black eyes paralyzed me. It had a big round bald head and extremely emaciated body, void of all hair, with very long, almost dislocated-looking arms and legs. Its legs were like a flamingo bird's at the knee, as it bent backwards instead of forward. I took all this in a matter of seconds. Suddenly, it reminded me of a praying mantis when it swayed back and forth while staring as if deciding whether to attack or not. This broke me out of my trance, and I ran as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I had ran a block. Out of breath and scared as heck, I finally took a glance back. I didn't see anything in sight. I didn't hear it chase me either. Maybe it was just stalking those people in those two little white houses and was waiting for me to go away to go back to its business. Maybe it didn't want anything to do with me. But that wasn't the end. I got home, took a shower, and turned out the lights before I hopped in bed when suddenly there was something tapping on my window.
Top, top, top.
3 taps and nothing else. I laid in my bed that night wondering whether it had followed me home or not. A string of bad luck ensued afterwards the following weeks. I was constantly burning stuff on the stove that was relatively easy to make, and I was an excellent cook on top of that. My dog started going nuts at night, growling and barking at night in the living room and at the front door, which she has never ever done, as she is the quietest, sweetest dog you'll ever meet. And finally, I got deathly sick for 3 weeks straight with no sure sign of what I had gotten. 103 fever, vomiting with blood, diarrhea with blood, sneezing, coughing, sore throat, migraines, nerve spasms, stuffy and dry nose. It changed constantly. Severe stomach aches, aching all over, really especially in my bones. Other lesser entities taking advantage of my state, trying to latch onto me, and slight insomnia. I've had smaller strings of bad luck before. After hearing its mimicry trying to lure me into the forest, or seeing it one other time, but I didn't see any details, but nothing ever this extreme. I don't go into the woods alone anymore. Sorry it's been so long, guys. After talking to people who know about and study this type of thing, we've come to the solution. It may have been a forest giant, a subcategory of fairy or fae. They have many names, and they are not what you expect. I also came to the conclusion there may have been a small one living my house for years. It has been gone for a good while now, though. Third story. They were never really deer. I can still remember what life used to be like. It's crazy to make a statement like about something that just transpired a little under a year ago, as though it happened in a bygone era of the past. The reality, though, is that nothing is the same. Nothing. The story that's been passed along through those of us that remain is that it all started in the state of Georgia last fall. It seems that a young man in his 20s was deer hunting on his family farm when he witnessed a large antlered buck stand and walk on 2 legs for just a few moments, as though he was humanoid, before resetting back to 4 legs and carrying on with chasing does. He even claimed that the entire muscle structure of the deer had changed, but he also reasoned that all the beers from the night before might have altered his coherency. Nonetheless, that didn't stop him from pulling the trigger on his grandpa's old .264 Win Mag and dropping the animal in its tracks from 150 yards away. Everything appeared to be business as usual for the young hunter as he proceeded to load the buck into his Chevy pickup and haul it back to the family barn to hang for a few days to allow the meat to age and tenderize. Normally, a hunter would have gutted the deer in the field, but this young man reasoned that he'd just take care of that once it was hoisted up high in the barn. No sooner had he accomplished getting the deer hung and winched before he grabbed his weathered pocket knife and proceeded to make the first incision into the buck's abdomen. What occurred at that moment is what would change life as we know it. You see, as soon as that blade pierced hide, the antlers to the buck began to sprawl out longer and longer until finally they formed a 4-digit appendage. Next thing the young man knew, his own knife was drawn across his neck, and he fell to the ground gasping for air as his jugular had been severed. The father of this young man rounded the corner just in time to see the being standing on 2 legs over his struggling son. He had just enough time to grab his own lever-action rifle propped against the doorway and cycle a shell into the chamber before it turned around to face him. In what seemed like a mirage, the being hazily transformed into the very likeness of his son. Being obviously conflicted, he found himself unable to pull the trigger as he aimed on its chest. The scenario became even more bizarre when from under scalp of this human-like being began to sprout antlers. Not just spikes, a full 5x5 rack. The farmer snapped out of it just in time to begin pulling the trigger again, but Humanoid took notice and was immediately on him, goring his torso with its rack. Supposing the old man to be dead, the being proceeded waltz out of the barn and into the house, where it murdered his wife. As best as anyone can configure from this entire situation, these beings have the ability to communicate worldwide. The reasoning behind this hypothesis is that they overtook the entire world that very night. And by they, I mean the deer. Not just one variety or subspecies of deer, by the way. All of the antlered creatures of the planet. The elk, moose, stags, mule deer, blacktail, cows, whitetail, fallow, axis, and so on and so on. They marched the neighborhoods of mankind that night and proceeded to slaughter every human they came across and steal their physical identity, with a set of antlers being added to the new look. I was only spared that evening because my, honestly, quite privileged family was flying on a private jet that evening. The news caught us just in time to keep us from landing at our runway in Los Angeles. My father directed the pilot to take us to our family's private island in Pacific. My dad's theory was that, given the lack of wildlife on the island, we'd be safe. His theory proved wrong. As we sat in the great room with my grandfathers and great-grandfather's trophy game heads on the wall and watched the live stream of the news, I heard a ripping sound. Before I had time to react, a seemingly malleable appendage burst through my father's chest and then withdrew as it took on the outline of my father and, you guessed it, sprouted antlers. It was then that I noticed the game heads were all missing their antlers. The antlers were a living entity for all of these years and had escaped the mounts. I won't bore you with the entirety of my trauma and survival of that evening. I'll simply tell you that I was the only member of 7-person household, plus our pilot, that escaped to the yacht that night traversed into the wide open ocean. I eventually dared to anchor towards land 6 days later to retrieve supplies. I soon learned that, much like everyone figured deer behaved, these entities rest during the day. So then, the chance of sneaking through a town to retrieve non-perishable goods and fuel were better around noon. I only went when absolutely necessary and took as much as I could at each excursion. You see, the sad reality is that the existing foods on the shelves out there will likely outlive me. What I found to be true was that they killed almost all of humanity that evening. The food is abundant, the fuel will eventually be a challenge, but with only a year having passed, that's not my first concern. Don't get me wrong, I've seen signs of other survivors in my travels up and down the West Coast, but I've never met anyone in person after that fateful night. It's the good old ham radios that have facilitated my human interactions. We are a small community worldwide of about 300 from what we've estimated, but we stay in constant connection and accountability with each other. We've managed to figure a few things out about our enemy. One of our survivors is an archaeologist, and he believes that these hoofed species hadn't originated with antlers on their male counterparts. Ancient cave drawings depict deer as antlerless going way back. This has given us the theory that the entity took residence in these creatures in the form of antlers atop their scalps ages ago. Of course, our most significant finding in this department was ability to survive indefinitely so long as the antlers retain their structure. This is why game head mounts across the world killed many people in a seeming covert-like strike. It's as though they hoped they would be hunted and displayed as part of their plan. Their intelligence has proved tricky to decipher. In personal confrontations, we've found them to be simply tyrannical in their ferocity and insanely quick in their reflexes, but not altogether cunning. I myself have narrowly escaped death a few times in my supple runs, I believe, only because I dealt with individuals and not herds. That being said, their true strength lies in their communication with one another. It's an almost eerie, hive-like system in which they are receiving orders and acting in unison. This is how they manage to conquer the world, we believe. As far as killing them, we have found that gunshots aimed to shatter the antlers themselves, especially more at the bases of the rack, do kill the being permanently. Before you get too excited, though, we've found that very rarely does a bullet strike its target given their reflexes, unless you manage to catch one resting, which they rest in herds. Of course, you might think killing the host form first and then smashing the antlers would be plausible, but it's not. The reality now is that they are now on the offense, so anyone who kills the host form soon finds themselves one of my radio pals. Alec from Australia claims he shattered one with a baseball bat, but who could prove or disprove that claim? To say the least, life is not, well, life anymore. I've lived in isolation for going on 372 days now. I've spent many moments pondering the very purpose for the struggle of it all, to just exist in general, but I came to a conclusion a couple of months ago, and it just might change everything. I would rather know that my life had some impact on the world, so I decided to declare war on them, slash it, whatever this is. It's funny how the fear of death being taken out of the equation can change literally everything. But, sure enough, that's what it took to get my creative juices flowing. I knew getting close was never a safe option, so I had to think distance. I started to observe them, and I soon discovered that they still retained their herbivore tendencies, even in human form. They actually ate like animals in a very primitive and glutinous way, as though it's their last meal with no caution to their soundings. So, I began to poison their various food sources with anything I could find. Antifreeze, drain cleaners, it didn't matter. I just needed it to make them sick. Since they travel mostly in large herds, I was finding myself unloading boxes of ammo each day from large-scale rooftops at the antlers of herds that lay lethargic and despondent in the streets. The fascinating part of it all was that, just like a hive, a new member will appear to take the place of a missing position in the herd. You might think this depressing to feel like you aren't accomplishing anything when you return day by day to the same numbers. The merit of it all came together, though, when I found myself only picking off stragglers in the streets of Los Angeles and realizing that I had finally killed everything in the area. So, my journey took me all over the state, and within a month I had refined my methods to the point that I cleared most of the large cities in California. Even better, though, was that my friends across the world started doing the same thing. We did lose a few of us in the worldwide battle, but in the last 2 months we've accomplished taking back many of major cities of the world. In fact, some of my friends began to rendezvous in person and recolonize areas. They even began fortifying them. We found that the safest method of surviving, though, was to remain out at sea a few miles in the evening until we were certain our newly reclaimed territories could be made impenetrable. I myself had been talking to a woman named Gabriela along the western coast of Mexico throughout this entire catastrophe, and we finally decided to meet in person and perhaps start something in our part of the world. We agreed to meet today along the coast of Acapulco. It was near sunset when I caught sight of her boat. I climbed aboard and called for her with no answer to be heard. Fearing the worst, I entered the cabin and found her there, her face marred beyond human recognition and her hands clutching a shotgun. There were empty shells littering the room and pellet holes all over the walls. That's when I heard a thud out on deck. As I peeked through the windows, my heart fell to my stomach. It was a whole flock of seagulls, with antlers. I've barricaded and boarded up the cabin as best as I can, but I know my chances are not great at surviving this. I warned the others over the radio and told them that I thought underground might be the next best hope of saving our race. I had plans to attempt steering this rig towards shore and making a run for cover on land, but the splashes and bumps I felt earlier removed my ambition as I felt the boat begin to sink. You see, I just pried a board open and peeked over the balcony into the waters. As I write this, my boat is being bombarded on all sides by a school of dolphins, and they all have antlers. Fourth story, Wendigo encounter. I've been debating on sharing this story with anyone outside of my small circle of people that were there. but I want to share my experience in hopes that it saves someone's life, or to give understanding of what someone else has experienced. Late fall 2010. In northern Canada, I went deep into the wilderness with my father and my eldest brother to hunt for moose. We left in the early morning, just before sunrise, trying to cover as much distance as possible before nightfall. We traveled winding rivers and had to repeatedly portage over rapids all day. We decided to set up camp just over halfway to our destination. My father figured that we'd make the rest of the journey tomorrow. Well, when everyone bedded down for the night, I decided to go grab some firewood and relieve myself down by the bank of the river, just out of reach of the light from the campfire. Out from the tree line, about 15 yards away, I could hear rustling in the bushes. I watched the area where I heard the noise and focused on that spot. I felt kind of funny, dizzy/lightheaded, and I could smell this putrid stink, like old milk or rotten food. Then I saw the trees start to morph and move ever so slightly and began to take the shape of a head and slight facial features. My eyes began to adjust to the darkness and along the tree line. I could hear this voice coming from there. I recognized it. The voice sounded like one of my relatives who had recently passed. The face took shape of my relative. "Hello," they said. "I've missed you. Come see me." I smiled and stepped forward a bit, but stopped to analyze the situation. My relative's face stopped smiling and became emotionless. The skin began to turn pale and peel away. Chunks of flesh from their cheeks began to fall away, and I felt shock and fear overwhelm my body. I couldn't make sense of it at all, so I started to back away and make my way to camp. I didn't realize at the time that I had been walking towards the voice and I was further away from the firelight. The voice became angry and began shouting at me to come here. So I turned to run away, but as I looked back one more time, I saw the most disgusting thing I had ever seen. It was rotting flesh on gnawed bone, caved-in eyes and a hollow chest cavity. This humanoid creature was tall and super thin. I ran as fast as I could, trying to yell for help, but the fear had made my voice quiet and raspy. I ran along the riverbank and I could hear the heavy breaths and the stomping feet from this thing right behind me. I made it onto the top of the riverbank, but it grabbed a hold of my leg as I jumped up. I gripped and tore the grass trying to lift myself and yelled as loud as I could. Then finally my voice came back and I yelled that, "Someone has my leg." My brother woke up and ran over to where I was. Then he pulled me up and took me over to the fire. I was terrified, trying to explain what I saw and that it looked like my relative, but not. I was trying to convince them that I wasn't seeing things, but my brother nodded his head and said, "I saw it too. I know." That solidified it. He acknowledged that it was real. We stayed up all night after that, rifles loaded and close by. We packed up when the sun was coming up and went back home. We haven't shared that story with anyone out of fear of being labeled as crazy or liars. I've had nightmares and couldn't sleep for months afterwards. I would see things/dark figures looking into my window or hear whispers when I was walking home at night. Eventually, I was seeing this dark figure daily. I went to medicine men/shaman for help, but I've learned that the ceremonies only relieves it temporarily. Friends have given me everything from protection pouches to certain crystals. I found out that there's a strong possibility that I encountered a Wendigo. I learned that if you encounter one and survive, it attaches itself to you like a parasite. I learned that it could only do this if it touches you, which it did. Ever since that night, I've been on edge when I enter any forest or wooded area, which sucks because I loved being outdoors/hunting and in nature. Now I always feel like I need to keep my back against something when I'm out in the wild. Anyways, make your own conclusions about this. I've paid a price for being an ignorant child to the stories of old. They are real. I can attest to that. Fifth story. I don't like deer. This is my first time really talking about this, so please excuse any weird phrasing or spelling errors. I've marked out my name and my associates' names for privacy, as I'm sure they wouldn't want to be connected to something like this. I used to work in a coffee shop. It was a run-down joint nestled on the line between Florida and Alabama. It's situated right beside the highway and blocked off by lanky pines. The owners, I won't say their names due to privacy reason, erected it after they got married 15 years ago but grew too old to take care of it. They ended up giving it to their snobba millennial son-in-law, who flunked out of business school 4 years ago. He took all the walls down and got rid of the stained brown carpets and yellow walls. Made all 4 walls completely glass and the floors white shiplap. It looks good, better than it used to be, but completely wasted when you remember that it's a shitty coffee joint with 3 employees in the middle of nowhere across from an Exxon gas station. The manager, the snobby son-in-law, we'll call him Robert, rarely came around after he realized how slow business really was. It was kinda sad, actually. He poured all of his effort into it, only to turn 25 or so customers a day. Now Robert only comes in to deliver my check, or take a dozen pastries to the sheriff's office a few miles down the way. If it sounds bad, it's because it is. I work with 2 other people, but they can't afford to put us all on one shift like they did before. So now I work the night shift, coming in around 3 p.m. and leaving at 9 or so. We close for an hour in between each shift so that we can brew more coffee and bake pastries. My coworker, Molly, a fake name for said purposes, would almost always come in late for the graveyard shift at basically 11 p.m. But it didn't matter. Robert could care less as long as he didn't have to be there. Molly was really sweet, just not very bright and obviously couldn't read a clock. So today, I got in around 3:15 and entertained a few guests who came in for black coffee before a football game. That brought in a bit of a rush, since football was the only notable thing this shitty town does on weekdays. I had a few families come in for hot chocolate and warm vanilla lattes. Those were fun to make since I have all the time in the world to practice my latte art. I made a tiny lily pad and flower on a little girl's hot chocolate. She didn't seem impressed, and I wished I drew a middle finger instead. The rush ended at 7:30 with an older gentleman with tan skin who ordered hot water in a to-go cup. Just the water? I always ask just in case, so I don't have to reopen the tab. Too many indecisive bitches who change their mind with their card in the slot already. He looked at me for a moment and nodded. Yeah, that's it for me. Do you need anything? I stopped for a second and met his eyes. They were dark and round, big dark bags under the eyelashes. He had wrinkles around his eyes and brows, heavy beard under his lips. I felt my face grow hot. No, sir, I'm good. Thank you, though. I tried to avert my eyes to his check, which I then realized was free since he only ordered water. You're all set. Stay warm out there. I smiled politely and turned back towards my barista bar, cleaning off my stir spoon with a rag. After a few seconds of silence, I turned, and he was still standing watching me clean. Is there anything else I can get you? My stomach might turning. I hate this. Being here in the middle of nowhere by myself. No one around if someone like this strolled in. I glanced up at the Exxon across the road. The lights were beginning to switch off with the sunset. The clerk must be closing up. I had a can of wasp spray under the register and I eyed it quickly. He shimmied from shoe to shoe, big eyes looking into my soul. What time do you get off tonight? He talked like he knew me personally, like we were supposed to catch a movie afterwards. I flinched, not wanting to tell him the truth. I work a double tonight, so I get off at 2 a.m. Late hours. I nodded respectfully and tried to leave the situation by heading towards the back. Why'd you guys put all this glass in here? He called after me as I entered the back kitchen. I pulled my phone out and set it up to call 911 if need be. I set my phone on the counter and faced him, finger hovering over the green call button. You could never be too safe. More natural light. Thought it would bring more people in. I invented. He smiled a bit back at me, looking around the empty restaurant. Did it? I laughed humorlessly and shook my head. He finally nodded and started towards the glass door in the front. He took a glance up and down the door and then slid outside with a wave. I breathed out the air I had been holding in for his stay. I cleared the numbers off my phone and brought it over with me to the coffee bar. Robert said when I was hired they had a zero-tolerance policy on phone usage while on the clock. But Robert plays bit life in the corner when it's slow, so I stopped caring real fast. I scrolled through Facebook aimlessly and ended up watching a few videos on YouTube. The time ticked on with no one passing through. I thought I saw a car passing by, but it was the Exxon employee going home. I waved widely goodnight knowing he would see me through the glass. He offered a half wave back and turned down the road into the darkness. Something stirred behind him in the trees. My eyes darted up the pine tree behind his car, and I noticed it swaying slightly. Then it stopped. I felt a cold chill race up my back. When I say we are in the middle of nowhere, it's not an exaggeration. The gas station and I were directly across from each other on the county road. On all sides of us were thick woods until about 10 miles when you finally hit a Dollar General. Then another 15 or so, and the only school in the county. I live about 40 minutes away, so the drive isn't too bad out here. It's just so isolating, especially when the gas station guy leaves. If there were bears around here, they would be around here, for sure. The only light in the woods for miles would draw them in with the promise of food. There had been a few animal problems in the past few weeks. The sheriff's office would come in after shift talking about farmers having their chickens killed in the night. There wasn't much they could do but show up to the farmers' houses after the fact with guns drawn. They hadn't shot down anything yet, but the townspeople talk all the time about finding huge footprints in their soil. I hate the thought of a bear finding me out here. Wasp spray probably wouldn't do too well against one of those beasts. I tried to push the thought out of my mind. I drew on a napkin and listened to Frank Ocean for another hour. Finally, 9 rolled around. I stood up and started cleaning off the counters and tables, cranking my music up louder. It was finally time to close everything down. I was jamming out, scraping crumbs off the pillows of the lounge seating when my phone dinged. I slid over to the coffee bar, already knowing it would be Molly explaining again why she was late this time. Probably her mom forgot to take out the garbage, or her boyfriend needed a ride to Walmart. I flipped my phone over, and my stomach dropped. TXT. Molly // work. Hey girl, I hate to do this, but my brother is sick and gave me a stomach bug, so I can't come in tonight. Can you cover my shift? I'll bring you food next shift. Pleading face. Fuck me. I slammed my phone down and closed my eyes. Cover her shift. An hour before I'm supposed to get off? That means I really won't get off till 3 a.m. Jesus Christ. I called Robert, who didn't answer for the first 5 rings. Robert, this is Rob. Me. Hey, Molly called out last minute and wants me to cover her shift.
Okay.
Me. So can you come in so that I can go home? Can't tonight. Have you tried Scott? Me. Heavy sigh. Yes, I've called Scott, and he's only available for mornings. Well, hey, extra hours, right? Good luck. I fought every urge to not scream into the phone as he disconnected. I decided to sit down and reevaluate every decision that led me here. Yes, I do need more hours. Hospital bills won't pay themselves. But fuck, I wish I didn't live here. I spent the next few hours grinding more coffee beans and fantasizing about having a cute apartment in a busy city somewhere. This and 2 vanilla chai lattes occupied my time for the next few hours. It was finally midnight, and I decided Robert wouldn't know if I closed early, and even if he did, I didn't care. Good luck, dickhead. I began switching the lights off and packing away the stale pastries in the glass cabinet below the coffee bar. Finally, I headed towards the glass doors. The locks were these long metal bars that go into a hole in the wood floors, meaning the lock mechanism was all the way at the bottom of the glass doors. I slid the glass door completely shut and kneeled down. This one was such a pain in the ass, but it's the only way to keep glass doors locked without looking trashy, as Robert says. Like the neon blue coffee sign by the highway wasn't trashy. I sat on my knees and fiddled with the lock, hovering it over the hole a few times to line it up properly. Finally, the lock fell into place and slid in with a faint click. I shimmied the door a bit to ensure it was locked properly. Satisfied and numb-legged, I finally stood up. I was met with the stare of something on the opposite side of the glass. I yelped instinctively, clapping my hand over my mouth. It had two huge and vividly orange irises that met mine instantly, almost like it had been staring already, and then I came into view. Its face was pressed against the glass forcefully, pale skin flat against it. I slowly realized it was an animal. A deer. It was a doe, with huge orange eyes. At least that's what my instinct told me, since it looked more like a doe than anything else. I stared at it for a few moments more, not knowing what to do. At first I thought it was dead since it was so morbidly still. But then I remembered it was still standing, and its body was moving fluidly with breaths in and out calmly. I finally broke my stare and stepped backwards, glancing at its body. It was big for a doe, at least I think so. I'm not too keen on animals like her, but it felt way too big and long to be normal. Finally, after nature's longest staring contest, I decided it probably wouldn't come up to a man-made structure like this unless it needed help. Animals have a way of knowing when humans can help them or not, and this one decided I could give it some help. I turned back to the coffee bar, grabbing my phone to call the sheriff's office. They have an animal control unit that adored animals. They would be able to help it. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. Ring, ring, ring. I was still watching the doe, who was watching me too, face still plastered uncomfortably against the glass. Big eyes not blinking. Thank you for calling County Sheriff's Office. If this is an emergency, please hang up and call 911. We are currently out of office or dealing with a previous issue. Please leave a message and we'll get back to you shortly. Thank you. I turned towards the kitchen, glancing at the wall clock. Since it's such a small town, they don't often stay at the office at this hour. I sighed and figured leaving a voicemail would help either way. Maybe someone would come in after whatever accident is holding them up and would come for help. Hey guys, it's from the coffee shop down by the state line. I have something weird for you guys. I'm looking for animal control to come help me with something. A doe came up to the shop, and it looks like it's in trouble. Its eyes are like super orange. I turned again towards the glass to check on the animal again. It was sliding sideways, shuffling its legs and keeping its face pressed against the glass, eyes staying on me. It was shimmying sideways to the right slowly. It caught me off guard and I stopped talking. What the fuck? Its eyes are orange, and it's acting really weird. It might be sick or something. The doe was catching speed. Legs wobbly as it smeared spit across the glass and slid to the entire other side of the store, never breaking eye contact. At this point, its lips were pulling back on the glass, revealing its mouth, which was full of blood and teeth. Perfectly square teeth. They looked like human teeth. What the fuck? I breathed, forgetting I was leaving a message on the phones of very religious conservative police officers. Sorry, something's wrong with it. Like, I think it's really sick and you guys should, probably come out and see. Please. I don't want to mess with it just in case. Please hurry. I finally snapped out of it and hung up the phone. I missed the counter with the phone since I was watching the doe, and my phone fell to the floor with a crack. The doe stopped. It froze quite literally like a deer in headlights. It was halfway to the middle door on the right-hand side of the store. I watched her, and she watched me. It felt like years that we stared at each other in stillness and silence. Then it began again, sliding itself across the glass, but with an unknown speed and purpose. I don't know why, but I grew terrified of this doe, and for some reason wanted the doors to be locked. I slid across the floor on my knees, shaking hands trying to lock the door into place before it was there. She slid across the ground, still hovering a few feet above my crouched figure in height. As I tried to lock the goddamn door, I couldn't help but look at it. Something felt so wrong. It was moving so quickly, and its legs couldn't keep up well. Speaking of her legs, they didn't quite look right. They were very long, and the fur around them had been what seems like singed off, leaving dark red and brown skin underneath. I was about to lock the door with her about 6 feet away when I finally realized why its legs looked so unusual. Instead of hooves in the dirt, this doe had ankles. Joints that connected its skinny legs to 2 flat, pale feet. Feet? What the fuck? I finally yelled out, my skin going freezing. My surprise was short-lived, and I didn't have time to think. The door was beginning to open. I clamped my fingers around the lock and the other side of the door, forcing it closed. I looked above me where the doe had lodged its hand, yes hand, into the crack between the 2 doors. It stared at me intently, not moving. I didn't know what to do. I used all of my strength to force the 2 panes of glass shut over its fingers. Fingers. I don't know how, but somehow I had the power to force them out of the crack, and the doors slammed shut. I slid the lock in with tears streaming down my face. What the fuck? I fell back on my ass, watching it. It looked unfazed as its fingers dripped with blood. It just watched me unravel. What are you? I couldn't help but ask in fear. It didn't move or respond, just sat in the dirt, letting its bloodied hand drag across the glass. Then it smiled. Its human teeth grew visible beneath its pink lips. I almost lost my latte all over the floor I just mopped. It started sliding again, but with a new intensity towards the complete other side of the glass to the other unlocked door. Luckily, I was faster, and I scrambled over, locking it fluidly before it even reached the halfway mark. We sat on opposite sides of the glass and watched each other intently. I have no idea how. I think it's because all of my adrenaline had been spent up crying, but somehow I ended up drifting off. I only woke up when my head smacked the side of the marble coffee bar. That's when my eyes flew open and the doe was not in front of me. I flew to my feet, blood rushing to my head. How am I so stupid? How do I fall asleep like that? I scanned the surrounding area, shaking like a leaf. The only remnants of the doe was the spit and blood trail across the glass doors around me. I felt my heart start to slow down. Jesus Christ, that was the worst thing to ever happen to me. I took a deep breath and decided morning shift could deal with cleaning the glass, and my time here was done. I waited about 15 more minutes, just scanning the night around me. The trees and highway were bathed in neon blue light, illuminating my lonely Ford in the parking lot. But still no sign of the doe. It was now or never in my mind. I started formulating a plan. I would have my keys between my fingers, Walmart parking lot style, and make a mad dash towards my car. Then I would lock it immediately and drive like a bat out of hell until I reached home. Yes, good plan. I never park very far away from the staff entrance out back. Probably only 100 feet or so away. I sighed heavily and picked up my phone. The entire front was cracked all the way down, blurring the LED lines into jagged pink and blue lines. I managed to activate Siri and dialed the sheriff's number again. It rang and rang. I hung up on my own. I finally picked myself up and checked my surroundings one more time. All clear. I took this as my sign and started towards the staff door behind the kitchen. I didn't hesitate and swung the door open, keys in hand. The air outside was freezing and completely still. My car sat across the parking lot facing the trees. Only 100 more feet and I would be safe and warm and headed home to deal with whatever trauma I'll have after this. I was running when I saw it. The tree right above my car was swaying back and forth heavily, the only thing moving in the woods. No, 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 no. I stopped in my tracks, realizing what was happening. Finally, the familiar bloody fingers began shimmying down the tree, leading itself downwards toward the ground. I saw the top of its head finally, illuminated with blue light. It looked like stitches, trailing all the way down its spine, bloody and raw. It was moving at an incredible speed, climbing face first down the tree. It took me a few seconds to react, and in that time, it had landed on all fours on the grass right beside the driver's side of my car. It paused, its orange eyes meeting mine once again. Except it didn't look like a doe anymore. Besides the pelt of speckled white and brown around its body, it looked like a person. Or maybe something in between a doe and a person, if that was a real thing. Its skin was half fur, half charred naked flesh. Its teeth were bare now, no lips holding them back, just pink flesh around its face, like it had been cut open. I couldn't help it. I screamed. It came out of me before I knew it was there, and I started running. Back to the store. I could hear its heavy footfalls behind me, extremely fluid and only a few inches away from my heels. I flung myself inside, holding the door handle closed. It was obviously messing with the door on the other side, trying hungrily to open it. Even though it was struggling, it made no noise.
No panting. No grunting.
It was soundless, like a hunter. It was hunting me. Then I heard it. So fucking clear I almost let go of the handle entirely. Hey, sorry I'm late. I had to stop and get gas. It was Molly. Molly. Right outside that door. What? Is all I could say, tears threading my eyelashes again. Yes, I'm sorry again. I already talked to Robert, so you're good to leave. Relief. Sweet relief that I wasn't alone. Then panic. Molly, you have to leave. There's something outside, Dash. Can you let me in? It's freezing out here. My blood ran cold. Yes, of course I have to let her in. I wanted to so badly in that moment. To open the door and let Molly in on this nightmare. My grip on the door loosened. Then it hit me. Molly is sick. She wasn't coming in at all tonight. Why is she suddenly here? Can you let me in now? Please. Her voice was strained and wrong. It was pitched so much lower than her normal bubbly voice. That wasn't Molly. My grip was too loose with my confusion. The door was flung open. I scrambled backwards on my ass again. It stood on two legs, and I finally got a good image of it. It was huge. Had to be 6 feet tall and skinny as the pine trees behind it. It had something under its head, well under the doe head. Something that resembled the jaw of a human, except it was unhinged and swinging from side to side with its motion. Blood dripped onto the floor. Its body was wiry, and I could see all the organs behind the papery skin. And that's all I saw before my fear made me uncap the wasp spray behind me and shoot that shit right in its face. It stumbled backwards for a second, and I took that chance to get off my ass and run like no one's business. I leaped over the coffee bar and started unlocking the glass door. It started sliding across the slick floor with inhuman speed, and the lock was not unlocking. Furuakuk. I screamed, trembling so hard the lock slipped out of my fingers. Somehow, and God, don't ask because I have no clue, I managed to slip it upwards and the glass slid to the side. I got on my feet and yanked the door shut behind me. I didn't turn but felt the glass shatter to pieces only a few feet from my back. Shards of sharp glass embedded themselves into the back of my flannel as I propelled myself forward towards the Exxon. They have an outdoor bathroom that was always unlocked that I used every now and then, and I've never wanted to be in that tiny, smelly bathroom more in my entire life. Before my feet hit the asphalt of the road, I felt it. Hands on my back, on my collar, strong, forceful hands on my shirt, yanking me backwards. "No!" I cried, snatching my arms forward, desperately raking my feet towards the highway. I felt my limbs crying out in pain as its nails dug into my flesh. "No!" I thought it came from my own mouth, and then realized I hadn't opened it again. It wasn't me. This thing has said it, and it sounded just like me. It was copying me. This is what broke me, and I finally launched myself over the threshold into the road. It lost its grip finally, and I twisted around to face it, crawling backwards out of the road. My elbows hit the soft dirt, and I fell backwards, pulling my legs into a ball. It geared up its body to leap. I shut my eyes. Then it was gone. A huge gush of air zoomed between us, followed by the squealing of brakes. The doe was launched yards and yards away into the woods. I heard the sickening crack as its spine hit the bark of a pine tree. I watched it tumble lifelessly into the brush below. How the pickup truck missed me is completely beyond me. Fuck. Did it hit a person? Was that a person? The guy driving was screaming, eyes bloodshot and huge. His pupils were huge too. I wearily stood up, grabbing the rolled-down window to look at my savior. No, I shook my head and leaped into the bed of the truck. I asked the guy to drive me to the sheriff's office, which he finally did after I convinced him that I wasn't going to turn him in for vehicular manslaughter. He had been high as a kite, speeding up to 70 on a 35 road with his lights off. That's why I didn't see him until he hit the doe. I really didn't turn him in, not that he gave me the chance. Once I got out the back of his truck, he sped off, turning his lights on and getting the hell out. Luckily, 2 of the officers were there, awake and overwhelmingly worried when I showed up with my shirt ripped almost off and blood all over me. They went over with their full unit and animal control, but I didn't go with them. Apparently, they followed the blood trails from the shop into the woods, and then it stopped completely. Out of nowhere, right at the woods line. They saw where my shirt ripped by the highway and collected it for me. They ran samples on the blood found. It didn't match anyone. They had to close down the coffee shop since I told Molly what happened, and we both quit. Scott and Robert were the only ones working, but it didn't take long before the horror story reached Scott, who then quit mid-shift. The town talked for sure. People came to my house asking about it. The police chalked it up to being a bear or a wolf, or some large animal that had rabies and was chasing me around. This was the story they went with, writing it in the papers, telling my family. I told them what I saw, and they decided that I was too terrified and traumatized to be seeing things correctly. Though there was a glint in the sheriff's eye when I told them what it looked like. Something inside of him believed me. I moved to Seattle a week later, taking out a loan and renting a studio right in the heart of the city, surrounded by people. I don't work anything but day shifts anymore, and I haven't had a chai latte since. I keep the blood-stained scrap of my flannel in my wallet as a constant reminder that somehow I'm fucking alive. I've told no one except my girlfriend who moved with me, and now you guys. We keep the lights on in the apartment constantly, even when we sleep. And I haven't passed a bottle of wasp spray without having a panic attack since. Truly, I don't know what happened, or what that doe really was. I don't understand anything that happened, except that now I have crippling anxiety when nighttime rolls around and that I nearly piss myself every time I see a deer of any sort. My girlfriend found a therapist for me and I go every now and then, but I don't really talk about what happened, just how alone I feel since it happened, that no one can relate to me, and no one else would ever believe me. Every now and then I get a call from the sheriff who is genuinely concerned with my well-being after seeing me in that state that night. The most recent time he called I didn't pick up, as I finally fell asleep that night, which was incredibly rare for me to fall asleep without sleeping pills. I woke up the next morning and groggily checked my phone. He called once, but missed. He left a message though. "Hey, it's me again. Just wanted to check up on you. I haven't seen you in a while. I didn't realize you left so quickly. I didn't have time to say goodbye. You should come visit again soon. We miss you here. Take care." I listened to it probably 12 times. I played it for my girlfriend, and we both listened to it a few more times after, comparing it to the other messages he had left. But she confirmed exactly what I thought too. Something was off about this one. It was lower pitched and strained. Not quite his voice,